Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Michelle. I'm an astrologer and the administrator of the Jeffrey Wolf Green Association of Evolutionary Astrologers. I'm here today with Jordyn Smith, the blogger and voice and astrologer behind Nonconformist Conscience, and a dear friend of mine, and also a student of the School of Evolutionary Astrology. And Jordyn and I are here to have a conversation today. We are in the process of gearing up to announce the very first EA online conference. And this conference is an opportunity for students of evolutionary astrologer Jeffrey Wolf Green of the lineage of the Pluto paradigm to come together for a weekend immersion into many different teachings on the core principles of evolutionary astrology. We'll be kicking off the weekend with a Pluto Paradigm workshop taught by Deva Green. I'll be coming to you in future months with interviews from many of the other speakers who will be included in the conference. Speakers like Jordyn and Helena, who will be talking on Lilith and the nodes. We have Demetra George as a special guest speaker doing a really wonderful presentation on asteroid goddesses. We will be looking at the planetary nodes and planets that square the nodes. Laura Nalbandian will be one of our special guests. And among the exciting topics, each one of them is uniquely brought through the lens of evolutionary astrology as taught by Jeffrey Wolf Green. So in this interview, I wanted to really get to know Jordyn more through the lens of EA. Jordyn and I are both moms, and we've been dear friends, and she's been a huge catalyst in my life as an astrologer. And as our paths have grown together, I've watched and witnessed Jordyn really deepen in the way that she brings forward not only her unique voice in astrology, which I think is such a rare and incredible blessing to the world, but she's really applied herself to the teachings of evolutionary astrology and to the paradigm. So Jordyn, thank you for being with me today. Super excited to have this conversation. To begin with, I would love if you would just tell everyone a little bit about who you are and how you came to evolutionary astrology.
Sure. I'm excited to do this because we have known each other for, you knew me right whenever I started to get into this work. So you've definitely seen, we've both seen each other's kind of evolution, which I think is really awesome. So like you said, I'm a mom. I have 2 kids and I am married. And I am someone who has just, to tie in EA, I have been someone who's been trying to get to the nitty gritty my whole life, like really diving in, and wanting to explore like what makes me tick, why I am the way I am. I'm a Pluto and Scorpio generation gal, so it fits the bill. And I have a stellium in my 8th house. So I was someone who experienced a lot of life before I found EA. It feels like I've lived many lifetimes just in this one. And I was in traditional therapy, but I was always wanting to do purposeful work, and I was wanting to understand myself in a deeper, more spiritual way that therapy wasn't really, getting me there. And I had been in therapy since I was 12. And then in my 20s, Pluto transited all of my planets in my 8th house in Capricorn, and at my Saturn return, I finally was just really tired of what was going on. And I definitely was throwing off a lot of I have a hiding signature in my chart, and I have been throwing off a lot of my own conditioning that was keeping me separate from doing purposeful work, out of fear of, just everything. And whenever I found this, I had been, researching, learning about astrology for about 10 years, but I would dip into it and dip out of it. And then I always knew that there was something more. Like, I was like, this isn't really, fitting the bill for me, everything I ran across. And one day I saw that there was a conference that was going down, and I was like, on a whim, I'm going to do this. I wasn't able to go because COVID hit. And one of the astrologers that was there, Nadia Shah, she was like, I'll send you all of these videos. And I was like, okay, I don't even know if she remembers this or anything like that, or even remembers who I am. But she sent them to me, and I saw Ari's video where he was talking about EA. And I remember I was like, oh my gosh. And so I got the Pluto book, because I was like, what is evolutionary astrology? And he had talked about Jeffrey Wolf Green. And I also have had a lot of really cool experiences in my dream work with Jeff, where I feel like there's a few of us who have. And that was kind of when I started having those and everything clicked for me on a personal level, that was like how do I want to put this? That was like my prove it to me moment, where I was like, this is real. Like, this is what I need to be doing. And from there, I just immersed myself in it. So that's my story.
That's so funny. You and I both have Ari Moshe and a Pluto transit to thank for bringing us to evolutionary astrology.
That's it.
I love it. That's great. Different paths, but the same core way of being. Well, what I hear in that is that you went from sort of seeking traditional therapy, which is not like, there's nothing wrong with that. I too was like in therapy from a very young age. And I think I share the similar view that at some point the soul goes, there has to be something more that I can do to evolve. And evolutionary astrology is one of those tools where somehow it allows for the reflection and the insight to be able to understand some of the dynamics in our lives in such a deep and profound way that it creates a space where understanding and change and shift can be digested.
Yeah, I would say, well, and I can talk a little bit about this. Whenever I got the EA videos, Jeff was talking about how he used to be a masochist. And that was something that I was like, oh my gosh, I literally joked with my friends. I'm like, I'm a masochist. And it makes me laugh now. Whenever I found this though, because I was really, my nature is not to be codependent. It's not to be masochistic, but through a series of lifetimes and conditioning, I got there, and I really, on a soul level, was wanting to break free of that. And so it was, like you said, it was the first time that someone was giving me language for what I was experiencing, to where I could come into a deeper awareness. And it wasn't just even on a psychological or emotional level, it was on a spiritual level. It was, it took me deep into a spiritual practice. I remember after I did Ari's little small groups before he started his school, I took a whole year to just immerse myself in this work, so that way I could really, I wanted to do this, but I felt like I wanted to walk my talk. And so I wanted to integrate what I was learning before I went out there and was like, I'm an astrologer. This is what I'm doing. And yeah, it just had a really profound effect on me for sure.
It's so interesting. I think for me too, what that Pluto in Capricorn, Pluto transiting my South Node, Pluto transiting my Venus, and then Pluto squaring the initiation of all of that just pushed me deeper into this work. Have you noticed since Pluto moved into Aquarius, like a shift in the way that you've shown up around your work, or what have things evolved and changed even in this year and how you relate to the charts and the evolutionary impulses?
Oh yeah, for sure. On a personal level and in my own practice, I live in a really, I live in Oklahoma. I know you know that, but there's some people who don't. And this, I'm going to speak in EA terms. I chose a family and a place to really force me to not hide who I was. Like, where I was like, okay, this is just so uncomfortable. I feel like I don't belong because I knew that I was very different. Not in a holier than thou, just I was always questioning, I mean, there's a lot. I'm not even going to go into that, but my point is that here in Oklahoma, there is a renaissance happening where there's a spiritual community that's wanting to come up. And what I saw in my own evolutionary growth, and me and Kristen are really good friends, and I talk to her occasionally, I could feel people would want me to do astrology a specific way here. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to conform to that. And that's why I always say that I want to stick to the meat and the potatoes. And so there was a lot of lessons around not conforming to how they wanted to approach astrology. It was more here kind of smoke and mirrors, pulling rabbits out of hats. And I was it was a lesson in being authentic this year and really liberating from any type of beliefs that kept me from being that. And that has actually helped my practice and on a personal level, because it calls in the people who I'm actually supposed to work with and who I learn from. Like, I learn from my clients all the time. It's not me just, it helps me grow. And so there was a lot of that this year where it was like me understanding my values in a professional sense astrologically. Am I going to do what people here where I'm living is doing, or am I going to do what feels right and authentic for me, even if maybe I'm not going to get paid a lot or I'm not going to get all the clients from here? And for me, it was very much, I don't care about that. I want to do purposeful work that has intention behind it. And so, yes, that's my Pluto and Aquarius spiel for me, which it's in my 9th house, squaring my moon. So it speaks directly to everything that I'm talking about,
And deconstructing all of that Capricorn sense of expectations. And I mean, I love your YouTube channel is Nonconformist Conscience, your website, that's like, but there's something about that speaks to what happens when you choose not to conform. And I even think evolutionary astrology, like in the larger scope of the astrological world, is kind of a nonconformist conscience in its own way, because there are all these other, paths of astrology were more like, oh, this is ancient and Hellenistic and Western, and they
galactic, all of it,
right?
Yeah.
They all have their different ways. And then here comes Jeffrey Wolf Green with like Pluto and the nodes and this idea that the soul has, is called and compelled by desire and by the desire to evolve, and that bottom line desire and all of the conditioning, right, that we experience as human beings is like what we're doing here is throwing off all of that to return to that most essential truth about who we are. And for me, I haven't ever found another branch of astrology that gets to like the meat or the heart of what I would say as like the calling, that why do we do like what we're doing in our life? What do we have these families and these karmic dynamics, and why do we get, entangled in relationships where, we're where we're
I
gonna
like
lose our
I
shit?
totally get it. I mean, I got pregnant right as Pluto entered Capricorn and hit my Uranus.
Wow.
So it started a whole cycle of all of my Cap in my 8th house was like these lifetimes of me not wanting to deal with this stuff, where all of a sudden it's like the way that I think about it, and it's a direct result of EA, is I chose this, and it's because I actually believed in myself before I got here. So it's like that makes me, and I guess that's my Capricorn, like I'm gonna do this. Like it can feel like it's gonna kill me sometimes because I want to resist, or I don't feel like, doing this, but it's like I always use the expression like the toothpaste is out of the tube. That's what happens with EA. If you try to put it back in the tube, it's going to make a mess. And it's interesting with nonconformist conscience that there are a couple of names that I just journaled about before I even found EA. And I had my apothecary, I still have it, but I went back and I looked at these other two names. And I remember thinking about whenever I wrote down nonconformist conscience, it was because, and I spelt it intentionally, conscience, CONSCIENC, like a guilty conscience instead of a consciousness, because that's what I felt all the time. And I didn't want to conform to that. And then I felt like I found EA and I was like, oh my gosh, like this person is like literally like, what's the difference between natural guilt and conditioned guilt? And so it made me chuckle that I even had wrote that out. And that is the intentionality behind it, is for people to understand. And it's totally an EA thing. Like you don't have to conform to feeling guilt. That's not natural. Like we don't need to go there, we need to get to the bottom of it, but like we don't have to conform to the conditioning that where we abandon ourselves, so yeah.
I love that. It reminds me of my favorite Jeffrey Wolf Green quote. I say this all the time, but like if you deal with the roots, which to me is like the Scorpio, if you do the Scorpio stuff, if you do the Pluto stuff, then the branches will take care of themselves, and yeah, so I love that. I'm curious, you have chosen this topic, Lilith and the nodes, and I've witnessed a lot of the work that you've been doing on the EA forum at jwgaea.org. We have a public online forum where people can post questions that relate to evolutionary astrology. There are a lot of resources, and many of the threads that you've started have become incredibly popular. And it's because I think, one, you're bringing forward questions that are deepening the conversation around evolutionary astrology. And I'm like, yes, amen to that. Thank you very much, because a lot of that doesn't get approached through the evolutionary viewpoint without people, just proactively bringing forward, what about this? What about this? And one of those threads is called the undistorted masculine, but it has become really a intentional thread around Lilith. And I'm curious if you want to talk about like how that has been for you to explore Lilith and what you're finding and what you're excited about. That's maybe like 3 questions all in there.
No, you're totally fine. That's the beauty of us doing this. Is like I said before we got on here, we'll just play tennis, in our conversation. Your Gemini moon and my moon in the 6th house is just going to be fantastic.
Well, we have our 2 other Gemini moons in the background here.
Yeah. that are probably chuckling right now. um so okay, I'll kind of, let me start at the beginning. So I have been, it's no surprise with everything that I've even talked about my own chart here, and how I found EA. You know, I am someone who has experienced a lot of trauma around the feminine and the masculine. And I really just, I can't explain it, other than I let my intuition kind of guide me. And I try not to second guess it, because there's sometimes I'm like, maybe I shouldn't pose this question. Like, is this silly? Like, you know, but if it's something that's really just kind of pops out of nowhere, I go with it. And it, before the undistorted masculine started, I was really looking at, I always would talk to Kristen kind of about things about trauma that I saw in people's charts, the experiences that I had. I feel like you are, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You have a gift at seeing trauma in charts as well. But I wanted to understand Lilith on a deeper capacity dealing with trauma. And this is also Pluto and Aquarius, okay? Like, this happened right before Pluto went into Aquarius. And so I had asked Kristen, hey, I've seen your work over Lilith and Amazon. Can we have a chat about this? And she was like, yeah. And we had like an hour chat where she just went over Lilith to me and what it represents in a chart. And we talked about it. And I think I kind of osmosed that energy and that teaching that she gave me into me. And it was within like 24 or 48 hours. I'm like, well, if we're always talking about the undistorted feminine, why is no one talking about the undistorted masculine? And because that's the distorted masculine totally is the patriarchy, you know, and like wanting to get to the nitty gritty of, if we want to bring things back in balance, I definitely think talking about the feminine is very, I mean, for matriarchy, all of that. But we also need to be talking about what it would look like for the masculine energy to not be distorted. What would that look like? Because I feel like a lot of us, you know, don't really get to see that. It's, you know, in an abundance. And it made me think about, if Lilith is the root of our soul and where we return back to center, like the essence of kind of who we are, whereas Pluto is our core dynamics that we've been working on, where we're trying to, what we're trying to work on through the, you know, whole Pluto paradigm. It's like to get back to that original wild woman that is undistorted in the masculine and in the feminine. Let's have a conversation about the undistorted masculine. And it made me question, is there something else in the chart that we should be looking at, like a more masculine energy? Or my thought was, if man came from woman, why wouldn't we be looking at Lilith for this? And that's really what kind of started the whole thing. So it was literally a gut instinct. Hey, I want to learn a little bit more about Lilith. Why not seek wise counsel? And my friend Kristen, who's done a whole bunch of work on this, had a conversation. And from there, it just kind of expanded out where, you know, I just, yeah, I wanted to know more. It got my brain ticking.
It's such an interesting thing, you know, because the transiting Lilith is in the sign of Virgo, which I definitely can think of from the perspective of this whole purification process of the knowledge base around. And I love that the exploration into the undistorted masculine. This has been a big part of my own personal spiritual practice, is like, how do we clear those perceptions of the masculine that keep and continuously trigger a perception of the masculine that reinforces, if our perception is essentially creating all the realities that we experience, then if the reality that victimization or toxic masculinity or what all the sort of hot buzzwords right now in the world, that your question of, well, what is the root of that? And that it actually leads back to the root of the undistorted masculine being in the undistorted feminine, and that they are one. I mean, that's a profound source of realization, right? That would point to the same truth, that the soul, all soul is one essential source, and that our desire to clear all those, conditioning to return to source is what is fueling our evolutionary journey here. So, and in the EA conference presentation, you're going to be teamed up with Helena Garcia, and teaching together on Lilith and the nodes, and the root, this idea of the root soul of, I wonder if there's something that you feel that you've discovered that has been most impactful relative to this deep dive into Lilith.
I mean, what I'm coming to understand is that it is the most natural essence of whom we are. It's our most natural sense of whom we are. And to go back to what was making my brain tick a little bit about all of this is I have a non-binary kid who has non-binary friends, and I'm thinking, I'm looking at all of their charts and they've got these like Leo, Aquarius, Pluto, and Capricorn, and it just got me going about, and then working with Mary on the thread, and her giving feedback about that actually is like, these are actually people who are coming in who are more, in alignment with the balance than, a lot of other souls are. And that's what they're here to do, is to kind of throw off this notion of what gender is. And it's interesting because that got me thinking and going back to how Lilith represents our most natural expression. If you just want to keep it simple, consciousness is genderless. And so it's, whenever we view it like that, and we are approaching it from this very simple, neutral place, and looking at what would it look like for all of us to be in our essence, like with not even having to label something as masculine or feminine, just to live naturally. That's really what Lilith has been doing for me. If I can, does that answer your question?
Oh, totally. And it's fascinating because it makes me think about, like, so transiting Lilith is moving through the sign of Virgo right now, but in August, like August 1st, when Pluto is squaring the nodal axis, like in the process, Pluto is going to progressively tighten into a square, which is exact starting July 22nd, but it remains in orb for a while. And then in the peak of the summer, Lilith enters Libra, and then progresses all the way to, like, where in October she crosses the south node in Libra. And I just feel like what you're pointing to is this ongoing process where, through relationship and through the breaking down of our conditioning, we are able to return to and heal. And this is what I feel most strongly called to in my own work. I'm teaching this class series called Love Evolution, and it's entirely devoted to this breakdown of our our consciousness at this point. It's like, through that process of deconstruction, we are also relearning how to be in right relationship, harmonious balance, where from a genderless perspective, we are able to relate to one another, as human beings in relationship to our essential source. Like,
It makes
That's
me
what
think
I,
of that expression, like my soul sees your soul.
oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Uh-huh.
instead of you're a boy and I'm a girl and this is what you do and this is what I do, or just, and that's very generalized, but you know, all of the things. I think what you're speaking about, I totally agree. It's like, yeah, it's this recognition of my soul sees your soul.
Yeah. I've been feeling this a lot with this particular time period because when we're Leo, Aquarius, Taurus, Scorpio, it's very much about these fixed identities that we have created culturally, socially, that are our own identities. And in many ways, they've helped us and served us. But even those are ultimately things that to get down to heal, like the deeper roots, we're coming back to then mother, father, masculine, feminine, which seem to be identity markers of like a more patriarchal world. But it's from that very forming and conditioning upon which many of many of us experience ourselves as souls having forgotten who we really are, right? As you think about, like, who were you before your parents told you who you were you before you listened to adults tell stories about things, and then, like, without knowing, in a seemingly innocent way, you started to mimic and become identified with the family conditioning that you came from, the place that you were from, the way men were supposed to be and the way women were supposed to be. And it's like we have to remove all of these structures in order to come back to a relationship to self that allows for something else to emerge, right? For truth to reemerge, for a sense of seeing, and this is where the vulnerability, I think of the vulnerability of Cancer, of like being unconditioned and from the womb, you know emerges in whether we're feminine or masculine. What you're saying, I hear, is that Lilith is this essential essence of our natural being before that.
Yes. And it can point out to where the distortions have taken place and how they manifest.
Mm-hmm.
So also if you look at like a hetero man's chart, you're looking at, you can see number one where his ideal image of a woman is, but you can also see the distortions around that stemming from the patriarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it's a non-hetero man, that's also just looking at the distortions of the inner feminine that's within.
Mm-hmm.
And vice versa for a woman, however she feels. Because, and I'm going to talk about gender a little bit because I think that it's so pertinent to this. And it's also Pluto and Aquarius. Like, you're talking about the breakdown of like these social constructs, and that's very much what this is where what I heard you say is like where we've over identified with our conditioning. And it's like, it makes me think of Aquarius. There's a beautiful Jeffrey Wolf Green teaching where he talks about it's the inner community. Like, what would that be like for each one of us to experience that, who we most naturally are, without over identifying with the conditioning? Like, even through this lifetime and other lifetimes, like, why did you pick your parents this lifetime? Why did you choose to have this go on? And this is my Pluto Scorpio stuff. Why? And I feel like, and in full disclosure for people, Lilith is conjunct my Pluto. So that's why I think I'm very adamant of getting to the bottom of what would it look like for masculine and feminine to be undistorted. It's
Yeah.
and yeah,
it's a really serious question, because in some level, like, the reality is we cannot clear these distortions without first seeing them fully for where they manifest, where they come from, what the effect is. I received this quote from Spirit the other day, which was like, the effects will change when the conditions are right. If the conditions are not right, the effects will not change, right? And that your investigative, like Lilith, Pluto, Scorpio energy is so powerful, because I think what you're bringing both to your work as an astrologer, and I'm sure to your own life, is really the depth of perception that is willing to fearlessly look at some of these more shadow and taboo areas. And it's like, yeah, starting that thread, that's like the uncomfortable conversation that nobody really wants to have. But, look at what has emerged from that. I feel like this is a part of your life's work as an astrologer. And I think it's a huge gift that you bring forward. I'm super excited for you to teach with Helena and to be a part of the conference. Kristen Fontana is teaching. She's doing the Road to Higher Love. She's doing this. We have so many amazing astrologers joining us. I'm really excited about that.
I'm like flabbergasted I was even asked. So like, thank you, all of you who, who definitely saw something. And I'm really excited that I am doing this with Helena, because her take on Lilith is, the core is there, like what we both feel, but it's that's the beauty of this work. Like if it speaks to you, you also know that like if one wins, we all win, because it's someone is giving what I say about Lilith may not resonate with everyone. And I feel like it's such a powerful thing, archetype to express. And I love Helena's take on it, because it is very, I mean, she's just her own person, right? It shows how we come into this world very different. And it's going to show, I mean, all of that is, I can't wait for what we're putting together.
Mm. I really think you're right.
Internet connection's unstable.
One of the things that I heard when the internet connection was unstable was, that if one wins, we all win. And I think you're right. Like what you and Helena are both choosing to explore, both from different lenses, but through the paradigm of EA, give people many different opportunities to be able to apply something to their own life, to their own chart work, to understanding themselves more deeply. And it's really in that spirit of community and like coming together to learn and to deepen that we've really created this conference. Like Kristen is one of my co-organizers, and it's a real honor to be, for the first time, like bringing together all these people and creating an opportunity for learning where everyone gets to win from the experience of participation in the
That's
teaching.
your Lilith, though. That's your Lilith.
Right? Is my Lilith in Capricorn?
No, your Lilith is actually in Aquarius in the seventh house.
Yeah,
and in the seventh house. So yeah, like this is part of your Lilith work of bringing community, helping stabilize, bring inclusion, giving, sharing, equanimity, helping people find their tribe. It's the archetype Aquarius is also astrology. I mean, we could run the gamut with, I mean, your Lilith here and just like what you're doing,
That is so fun. I never thought about it that way, but you're right. I have that Lilith, and it's what I love to do. I love organizing everyone together and bringing all these different new thoughts and ideas, and making something like, it's revolutionary to me. To spread ideas is one of the most powerful things that you can do in the world. And So here we are bringing Lilith into the EA
Love it.
conference. And yeah, it's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jordyn. Is there anything else you want to say or share before we close for today?
No, I think that's good.
Awesome. Well, we have a special coupon code for Jordyn. If you want to register for the conference, online registration is available, and you can use the code Jordyn, JORDYN, to get a discount on the registration. And so if you feel inspired and want to join us, the dates of the conference are October 6th through the 8th. It's a weekend. We'll have a Friday workshop on the Pluto paradigm, and then Saturday and Sunday all day are full lectures back to back. And all of the recordings are included in the full conference price. You can attend them live. You can watch the replays. You can, listen to these teachings over and over and over again. And Jordyn will be with us for that weekend. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. This was a really fun and special conversation with my dear friend. And I just, I love it. I love what you're doing. Check out Jordyn's work, nonconformistconscience.com. And thanks to my Gemini moon twins for supporting us today to have this conversation. I so appreciate everything you guys do on the EA Zoom channel. Bye for now, my friends.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm excited about this.
Oh,
I can't wait.
A lot of the speakers, in fact, a pretty solid majority of them are like people from the last Evolutionary Astrology in-person live conference.
Awesome.
So we're sort of like bringing back together this very core group. Plus we have, several new and up and coming topics and speakers. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So
one thing is, if you could clarify for the audience, what Lilith you're talking about specifically.
Specifically, I was talking about Lilith the Asteroid in transit. I know that there is also the black moon and the dark moon, and I personally follow the asteroid and use her in my chart work. I think that's who you were talking about too, Jordyn, right?
Yeah, and I'll go into this a little bit. I teach because I think that it's it good. But the asteroid is the actual body in the sky, whereas the other ones, resolution, white Lilith, all of those are just kind of points in the sky, but there's no actual body. And you can see all of those archetypes encapsulated in the asteroid Lilith, which is going to be what I'm teaching on, part of it. And you can see the evolution of Lilith in the art also, because that's an actual physical body. It has a south and a north nodes, and they have rulers as well. So that's what we are going to be covering.
That's super exciting. I look forward to learning about the planetary nodes of Lilith as well. Yeah.
Yes, it's all juicy stuff.
Well, keep growing and doing what you're doing. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. And thanks so much, Sue and Robin.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, ladies.
Bye.